The first mistake is material overactivity. How many times has this happened to you? Your opponent intentionally decides to sacrifice a material for some extra activity, and without completing enough development, you decide to go for it. Feels good, right, winning some free material, but then few moves down the line, you tend to notice your position has become passive. It is very, very difficult for you to find active moves, and boom, you're just lost. Well, that is what brings us to our first mistake. See, whenever you have to make a choice that do you go for extra material or do you start developing, how do you know that which one is better? For instance, in this position, black here has an important choice to make. Does he take on b2 and start winning some material, or does he start developing with knight c6? How does he know which one is better? Well, for that, he has to consider the dynamics of the position. In terms of development, you can see white has 1, 2, 3, and 4 active pieces. Meanwhile, black only has 2 active pieces. So black is a bit behind in development. But the main question over here is that, can the center be opened up? If these pawns launch forward, then obviously the center could be opened up. And it is obvious. The guy with the more active pieces on the board is likely going to be dominating it. And that is going to be white. So taking on b2 is not a good option for black. That's why black should consider a move like knight c6, rapidly develop his pieces, and he would stand better. But instead, in the game, black decided to take on b2. Now, although this is not a mistake, this just allows white to bring more pieces with tempo. Rook b1. The queen is forced to move to a3. And now look at this. White plays f5 trying to break open the center. And remember, black doesn't have enough pieces to guard his king. That's why he plays e5 trying to keep the center closed. But now white happily decides to give up his bishop pair. Bishop takes f6, g takes f6, completely ruining black's pawn structure. There's the pressure on the b file, meaning that this bishop can never come out. Also, castling kingside is never a possibility. The g file is open, the h file is completely weak. Meanwhile, white just happily moves the knight. The queen is placed very far away from the king's defense. There is threat on d6, bishop c4 is coming, and moreover, there's the beautiful outpost for the white knight on d5. Black got into all this trouble because he decided to be greedy without enough piece activity in a position which could be easily opened up. This brings us to our second mistake, unenergetic leave with a lead in development. This is one of the most common mistakes among new players because they don't know generally what to do when they have a huge lead in development. Well, I'll try to fix that. First, have a look at this position. In this position, white is castled and has a slight lead in development. Because black is yet to castle, he'll take one more move to castle and bring his king to safety. And white doesn't want to allow that. That's why he has to make active moves to try to force and harass his opponent. So what is the most active move for white here? That is obviously pawn to e5. It forces black to react to the threat of e takes on f6, giving him no time to run away by castling. So the knight is practically forced to move. If you're wondering about queen 6 e5, well, that's not possible because rook e1 comes with the pin along the e file and the queen is lost. That's why knight d5 is practically forced. But now comes knight e4. This leaves black with another question. Does he save the bishop or not? Losing the bishop pair is definitely not a good idea. That's why he plays bishop b6, trying to save the bishop pair. But now comes rook e1. And again, taking on e5 leaves black with more problems. But no worries. He thinks that he can get away with all of his problems by castling. But since white was making active moves all along, he plays c4, tries to drive the knight away from the king side. And once the knight moves away, now comes the bishop knight sacrifice on f6. G takes f6, and white even sacrifices the bishop. The queen joins the attack, and with the rook coming out to help out, the black king is not going to survive. That is the power of making active moves. But instead, in the game, white played queen to f3. And this just lets black to escape via the move castles. Now you no longer have e5 because queen takes e5. There is no longer a pin that exists on the e file. So white is essentially forced to play a much more longer game with unsure that which side will have the advantage. Had he found this active move of e5, he would be the one enjoying the advantage. That's why whenever you have a lead in development, make active moves. Try to make as much active moves as possible, harass your opponent, and surely you'll be the one coming out on top. Mistake number 3 is very closely related to one of the most basic chess principles. When you're just starting out with chess, you're advised to castle within the first 10 moves. But as you progress, you learn that that is not always the right idea. This is why I will show you 2 common scenarios where you must avoid the possibility of immediate castling. This is the first situation. Immediate castling in close position should be avoided. Here white has to make a decision. Does he play c3 and try to solidify the center? Or does he go for immediate castles? The problem is that the center is completely closed up, meaning that all the action will be happening on the flank side, that is the queen side and the king side. If white were to go for immediate castles king side, then black will get the massive pawn storm g5, g4 trying to open up the king side. Meanwhile, black's king is absolutely going to be fine in the center of the board because white will take time trying to challenge the center. This is why it is a good idea for white to wait and see that what the black king is going to do to himself. Instead, white makes the mistake of immediate castles, and this just allows black to grab the initiative with g5. Now white has absolutely no time to play c4 and try to challenge the center because g4 comes with the threat of forking both the pieces. So white has to lose time going back. Now comes g4. Black's pawns just keep on rolling forward. Knight e1. You can play h4 and try to open up the lines of the rooks and the bishops if you're ambitious, or you could just take the pawn on d4. And soon this e5 pawn falls and white's position just basically collapses. This is why c3 was a better option for white. Because g5, if black goes for the same technique now, Now white can just move the bishop back. g4, the knight could go to g1, and this overextension has become a problem for black. There is the weak square of f4. There's knight e2 to knight f4 maneuver. And also in the future, if the center opens up, white can consider his possibilities of going immediate queenside castles. That would be much more better for white. Situation 2 says you shouldn't castle on the side where your opponent's pieces are already pointing towards. In this position, both the sides have a queen and bishop battery that is pointing towards each other's king side. But the main difference lies in the c bishop. Black's c8 bishop is unable to participate in the attack, meanwhile white's c8 bishop is much more powerful because bishop g5 comes with the threat of taking the knight, which is the only defender of that h7 square if black decides to castle in the future. That's why now black has to make a decision. Does he want to castle or does he want to play c5 trying to undermine white's center control? Now c5 to the new eye seems a bit risky because why would you like to open the position without castling? But that was the right decision. In the game, black decided to castle kingside, and this is a mistake. He did not take these factors into consideration that so many pieces were pointing towards black's kingside. Now comes bishop g5, and now black has to face with the decision of either losing the pawn or ruining his pawn structure. If h6, then there is bishop takes f6, d takes f6, and the pawn structure is completely messed up for black. So that's why black in the game decided to play bishop e7, takes. Black lost the pawn, and later on he went on to lose this game. Mistake number 4, missing tactical ideas. It is necessary to know the tactical ideas of the openings which you play because sometimes your opponent might play a weird move to throw you off guard, and if you continue in the usual manner like you do, you might get into trouble. I will show you this example with everyone's favorite opening, the London system. d4, d5, bishop f4, and instead of black continuing with the usual knight f6 or e6, he decides to completely surprise white with the move h5. If you face something weird like this in your own games, I suggest you taking some time trying to figure out the tactical intention behind this move. As for white thought that his opponent was completely crazy, pushing his d-pawn and his flank pawn all together. He played e3, quickly aiming for the normal London system with knight f3, bishop d3, and c3 setup. But little did he know that e3 was a huge mistake. And black played the move e5, and now white realized the main problem, that he was the one in huge trouble. Because if you take with the pawn g5, and the bishop gets trapped on the next move. Also taking with the bishop doesn't help you all that much, because the bishop again meets with the same fate of getting trapped. Thousands and thousands of players online and offline has fallen for such kind of a trap. That's why when your opponent makes a weird move, instead of going for it directly, the normal setup, try to think what's the logic that my opponent is trying to apply. Easy going for some sort of tactical ideas, easy trying to set a trap, and then you should make your move by taking some time. Now this might be the most crucial mistake out of all of them. If you're making this mistake, just forget about your chess improvement. And that is focus on one thing. What this means, if you keep on switching chess openings every now and then, congrats, you're killing your own chess progress. How this works is that let's suppose you watch a Gotham Chess video about the London system. He says it's very powerful. You watch the video, learn some theory, and you start winning some games. But then you hit a bump where you lose a lot of games in a row and start thinking it's just trash. Then you watch another video about another opening, and the same process repeats again. You decide to switch instead of studying that opening deeply and learning from your mistakes just because you lost some games, and you start thinking again it's trash. You keep on switching openings again and again, and boom, you haven't achieved anything. Your rating is stuck. Openings are not just about memorizing moves. They're about understanding ideas, plans, and learning from your mistakes so that you can improve. Top players like Magnus or Hikaru, they don't try to learn 10 openings at once. They specialize in one opening, try to master it, and only after understanding it deeply, they slowly expand their repertoire and try out different openings. This is why you should choose one opening, study it deeply, understand its ideas, play games with it, learn from your mistakes, and once you think that you have become a master in it, only then you must try out different openings, repeating the same process all over again.